Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience. My name is Heather Conley. I'm Director of the Europe program here at the Center for Strategic and International Relations. We are absolutely delighted to have Kyriakos Mitsotakis here with us this afternoon. Boy, you decided to come in on a busy news day. That's all I have to say. Well, we're so grateful. We're going to dispense with the keynote remarks. There is so much to talk about. We're going to jump right into the discussion. But before we do that, let me briefly introduce you to a room that I don't think I have to really introduce you. So I'm going to do it very quickly. Mr. Mitsotakis has been a business leader, a financial analyst, CEO of National Bank Holdings, private equity and venture capital in Greece and the Western Balkans, a parliamentarian since 2004 on foreign affairs and defense committee, environmental work. You have been almost on every important committee in the Greek parliament. And of course, since 2016, you have been the leader, the president of New Democracy. And what a perfect time to jump right in and talk about what's going on, particularly in your neighborhood. So if I may, welcome.
Well, thank you.
Can I first start with, you traveled to New York first and then came down to
Washington. To Boston. To Boston first, yeah.
Did you beat the snow? Excellent.
I managed to sneak out right before the snowstorm.
Excellent. I think they are getting about 12 inches of snow.
That's what my son told me.
Oh, that's right. Well, tell us, why are you here now? What is the purpose of your visit, and what did you want to accomplish with your visit here?
This is obviously a very interesting time, I think, to make the case in front of a U.S. audience why we should take a fresh look at what's exactly happening in Greece. Greece has been making the news over the past years basically for the wrong reasons. As a poster child of a deep economic crisis, a case study for the failures of the Eurozone. But I think there's good reason to look at Greece and see the glass half full rather than half empty. In spite of the significant shortfallings of the current government, we will be reaching the end of the third program in August 2018. And before we talk about the geopolitical challenges, the first question that really has to be answered is what will happen with Greece after the end of the program. What sort of conditionality is going to be imposed by our creditors? Is there going to be any sort of significant debt relief? What is going to be the role of the IMF? But all these questions have to be answered within the context of what we do domestically. And what I'm advocating is for an aggressive reform agenda that will look at Greece's significant potential going forward. And most of the fiscal consolidation has actually taken place in Greece, but what hasn't really happened with enough emphasis is the real deep structural reforms that will make our economy truly competitive and improve the efficiency of the public administration. And I really want to talk about those issues because they will, to a great extent, determine the future of the country. And as much as we want to talk about, and we will talk about, Greece's enhanced geopolitical role, if Greece is not strong economically, we don't have much of a role to play geopolitically. So at the end of the day, this is fundamentally about getting our act together domestically, about strengthening our institutions, and about leveraging our position in a dramatically different geopolitical environment, very, very unpredictable geopolitical environment. So these are the three main issues I talk about during my trip. How do we get the economy to grow again? How do we build solid institutions and make sure we strengthen our democracy? And how do we navigate a treacherous geopolitical environment? And I think these are issues which are particularly relevant also to a US audience, not just when we talk to investors who may be interested in investing in Greece, but also when the US is looking at a region where nothing can be taken for granted. I think the message is that you can take Greece for granted as a credible ally in a very, very treacherous neighborhood.
Well, I would love at the sort of the end of our questions to go back to the domestic environment, because I think that's so important. But I'm going to start with the treacherous geopolitical environment, if I may. And I think we have to begin with one of the countries that is the most concerning in the Eastern Mediterranean to us right now, and it's Turkey. And certainly the last week and a half, really significant events with the arrest of 2 Greek soldiers. And you, in fact, had quite a sparring match with Prime Minister Tsipras in the parliament about steps that the Greek government is currently taking for the release of those 2 soldiers. Help us understand and put this into context on Greek-Turkish relations. When I visit Athens, I am always surprised. It is Greek officials who are advocating for Turkey to remain close to the Euro-Atlantic partnership, but this is clearly straining domestically. Demonstrations the other day in northern Greece. Help us understand what this is.
We've always, and I personally have always advocated for good neighborly relationships with Turkey. And we are destined by geography to live together, and we should do so peacefully. And this should be a mutually beneficial strategy, both for Turkey and for Greece. But good neighborly relations are based on respect of international law, and also on respect of those sort of unwritten rules that determine the state of bilateral relations. What we have seen over the past months, and which is very concerning, is an increased level of aggression in the Aegean. We've seen President Erdogan making the case publicly that the Lausanne Treaty needs to be renegotiated. The Lausanne Treaty is the foundation of regional stability, and it's a treaty that basically determines the borders between Greece and Turkey. So there's nothing really to renegotiate regarding Lausanne. These statements are inflammatory by nature. Sometimes they play to the Turkish domestic audience, but they have international repercussions. So I think the first thing we need to do is to make sure that we de-escalate the tension in the Aegean to avoid any sort of accident that could easily spiral out of control. We need more confidence-building measures. We've had experience in these sorts of discussions in the past, and we need to look at strengthening our economic ties. And certainly, I would not want, and I don't think it would be beneficial for Turkey to cut its ties with the European Union. But it takes 2 to tango. And of course, the most recent incident with the arrest and imprisonment in a maximum security prison of 2 Greek soldiers who, by accident, entered Turkish territory is very, very concerning. These are border incidents that actually happen, I wouldn't say very frequently, but they have happened in the past. They were always resolved through a direct communication between the colonels in charge. It wouldn't even reach the level of the local generals. This time, that was not the case. So I'm again urging publicly Turkey to release the 2 Greek soldiers as quickly as possible. There's no reason whatsoever why they should be in a maximum security prison. This is a minor incident. It should not be turned into a major diplomatic episode. I think the government underestimated the importance of the incident, and clearly one of the issues I have with the Greek government is that it seems to be talking with 2 voices, different approaches adopted by the Prime Minister and a different approach by Minister of Defense Kamenos. And this is highly problematic. The Greek government today needs to present a unified front. For that matter, the country needs to present a unified front. I've been very, very careful publicly when I've criticized the government when it comes to foreign affairs. Because I think what last thing we need is to make a foreign policy problem, turn it into a domestic political problem. The Greek political debate is toxic enough. We don't need to add more fuel to it. On the other hand, it's the government's responsibility to do whatever it can to ensure that the 2 soldiers are released as quickly as possible. Again, I would publicly say that this has the potential of, this incident has the potential of doing great damage to the goodwill that I think exists between the 2 people, and rightly so. But this is a very concerning incident, and I would again urge Turkey to address it as quickly as possible.
I think we're also watching very closely as some offshore energy production, offshore Cyprus is beginning, certainly seeing ExxonMobil is involved in this, Eni as well, the Turkish vessels that are being sent, warships to those areas. This is also something very concerning. Would welcome your reflections on issues related to Cyprus. We came very close last year to, with the hopes of some efforts of reunification that fell apart, in part because of security guarantees. What's your reflections on, and your prognosis, if you will, for potential success of reunification talks?
First of all, what's happening within the Cyprus exclusive economic zone is just not concerning, it's unacceptable. It's a direct violation of international law. Cyprus has every right within the exclusive economic zone to drill and to exploit whatever hydrocarbon resources it can find, and sort of connecting what happens within the exclusive economic zone to the talks on Cyprus is in my mind not a valid argument. Also, to the extent that President CSIS has publicly said that they want to create a fund that is going to benefit the entire island, and obviously, should the Cyprus problem be resolved, this is going to be wealth that is going to be shared amongst Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. You're right to point out that we came close in the recent round of negotiations, and I would very much urge all involved parties to pick up the momentum from where we stopped. Security guarantees need to be addressed, and I think Turkey understands that a security arrangement that dates back almost 55 years is clearly outdated in today's world, and we cannot have these types of security guarantees if we really want to solve the Cyprus problem. And this is also the area where Greece is involved. The other issues, the domestic issues, it's up to the two communities to address those. I mean, progress has been made, but I don't think we should be deterred. President Anastasiadis, who's a close friend, and I firmly believe in his leadership, managed to steer the Cypriot economy out of a profound economic crisis. Lots of lessons to be learned also for addressing our economic problems. What Cyprus did is a good example of what we should be doing in Greece. He won a second mandate. The two candidates that actually made it into the second round, both were in favor of finding a solution. So we should pick up the momentum, but it's very difficult to do that while Turkey is actually provoking within the Cypriot exclusive economic zone.
Absolutely. Let me turn towards, this is a fraught geopolitical neighborhood for sure. Let's turn to the Western Balkans. Today, and I'm going to just read something to you. Today, Assistant Secretary of State Wes Mitchell is actually in Skopje. Mm-hmm. And I just want to read a quote that he told, he was speaking to journalists, he told these journalists that there is a tremendous opportunity for Skopje and Athens to reach a deal over the name recognition issue, and that he felt that we are encouraged with the steps that Greece and the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia have taken, so we want to be supportive. So I want to ask you, is this a tremendous opportunity, and are you encouraged by the steps that have been taken thus far? You raised some issues about needing a package. It goes beyond getting the name right. It talks about constitutional changes, educational changes in the school books. Help us understand this. It feels like we're getting close.
I'm a little bit less optimistic.
Okay.
The reason being that and I'll talk about the Greek side for a moment. I do recognize that the current government in Skopje is more open to a compromise on the previous government. And this has to be acknowledged, it's a fact. But let's look at what really happened in Greece when this issue first came to the forefront. Prime Minister Tsipras had an opportunity to create a unified front and to articulate a common position that would unite most parties in achieving the best possible result in this negotiation. He failed to do that. He briefed us only after he had seen Prime Minister Zaev. At the same time, he seemed to completely underplay the sort of instinctive reaction of a significant portion of the Greek population who feel very strongly about this issue. This is essentially the return of identity politics. People care a lot about this issue in Greece, and Prime Minister Tsipras never respected that. If anything, he branded everyone who protested, against any use of the name Macedonia, either as belonging to the far right or as being completely out of touch with reality. He insulted actually a lot of people. So he failed to create the sort of momentum that is necessary for a compromise solution, and he never wanted to bring the opposition on board. If anything, he tried to divide the opposition. I think one of his main goals was to divide New Democracy on this. He failed on that respect. Now, we've always been talking about a package solution. This is not a solution that can be addressed in steps. And of course, a package solution has to include changes by Skopje of their constitution. In my mind, it's a mandatory requirement, but also addressing the issues of identity, irredentism that still exists within school books. These issues sometimes are even more important than it's even more important than the issue of the name. I'll give you an example of the sort of things that really offend Greeks, and I'm sure that even those within the audience who are not Greek, I think, will understand what I will say. For example, there was a talk show that a British talk show 2 months ago. Host asked the question, what was the nationality of Alexander the Great? The player answers he was Greek. Talk show host says, no, wrong, he was Macedonian. So these issues are really cause a lot of emotional reaction. There's nothing to be shared regarding the cultural heritage of Alexander the Great. Because I read the statement by Prime Minister Dimitrov that we need to share our cultural identity. There's nothing to be shared there. I mean, Alexander the Great was Greek. There's no doubt about that. And we're not going to enter in any discussion or any negotiation about this. This is a core part of our national identity. There's no compromise on this issue.
We will stay tuned on that front. Let me stay in the Balkans for a little bit. There's some other big issues, concerns about Bosnia, concerns about upcoming presidential elections in Montenegro, of course, Serbia and Kosovo. Greece is one of 5 EU member states that has not recognized Kosovo. What keeps you up at night, other than the name recognition issue and the broader issues in the Balkans? Greece has always been a strong thought leader for the Western Balkans. The Thessaloniki summit remains the key architecture of that enlargement strategy. What are you following in addition to this important name recognition issue? What other issues are
Well,
concerned?
first of all, let me point out that it's unfortunate as a result of the crisis, but also as a result, I think, of a certain lack of interest by the current Greek government. I think we're losing our leadership role in the Balkans. And this is a pity, because Greece remains the only country that is a member of EU, NATO, and the Eurozone, was always, still is, in spite of the crisis, the richest country in the area, and was sort of a model country towards which many Balkan countries aspired. I don't feel that we are playing that role in the Balkans to the extent that we should. The Western Balkans are by nature very, very, very complicated, and of course we know that keeping the sort of Euro-Atlantic path open for the Western Balkans is critical in maintaining peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. This is something that also, Fyrom Skopje need to understand. If they care very much, and as they should, about this issue, I think they need to push harder to find a solution. But it's not just about Fyrom. I think Serbia Look at the role of Albania and Serbia. These are the two pivotal countries in the region. There's a tug of war regarding Serbia's direction, but I think that we need to keep Serbia firmly anchored to the west. It's a critical country for the stability of the Balkans, and I think it's also important to make sure that we normalize our relationships with Albania, and the discussions that have taken place. There have been efforts also in the past. I think that there's a broad agreement within political parties that relationships with Albania need to be streamlined. Lots of outstanding issues, but not as important for Greek public opinion as the issue of the name. So lots of challenges, but no easy solutions. And let me point out that these countries still have to go through a process of nation building, and there's a lot of work to be done domestically. It's hard work, but it has to be done.
Well, just a reflection. I think the United States, in many ways, has also taken its eye off the importance of the Western Balkans and staying engaged. But I will say one country that has increased, I think, its role and influence in the Balkans has been Russia, certainly. It was a wake-up call for many in Washington and the alleged coup attempt in Montenegro in October of 2016. And so I think just bringing that sort of back to the region and back to Greece, we are concerned about a Russian influence in Greece. And I think we all sort of, if you opened up your New York Times today, you saw an article about a Greek-Russian oligarch in Thessaloniki, Ivan Savvidis. He's certainly amassing quite a significant property holdings in Thessaloniki, the port as well. He has stated that you will never become prime minister. He's also the president of the Russian Association of Greek Communities. Help us understand Russian influence in Greece, because it is worrisome to us, as their influence here in the United States is certainly very concerning. Help us understand that.
Well, I think regarding Mr. Savvidis, you're asking the wrong person. You should ask Mr. Tsipras, because he was and still is to a certain extent in bed with him. What I mean is that there was a very cozy arrangement between Mr. Savvidis and Mr. Tsipras, where he actually, Mr. Tsipras tried to accommodate Mr. Savvidis by writing off some fines that one of his cigarette companies had accumulated, and in exchange for that, Mr. Savvidis expressed an interest in buying media outlets that clearly support the government. So we've been talking for a long time about the new generation of oligarchs who have very cozy relationships with the government, who are very close to the government, and who are actually worse than the old oligarchs that we had, because we had old oligarchs. Let's have no doubt about that. And when we talk about these issues, nobody seemed to pay a lot of attention, and I made my position very, very, very clear. It's not up to anyone but for the Greek people to decide who will become a prime minister. I'm not to be blackmailed, and I'm certainly not going to be intimidated by anyone. But it took an invasion by someone with a gun on a football pitch for people to notice, and for people abroad to notice. I mean, these scenes are embarrassing. They're embarrassing for the country. Greece is not a post-Soviet sort of quote-unquote democracy, and it is my duty, if anything, and this is more important even than what's happening in the economy, to make sure that Greece does not become a failing state when it comes to its institutions. And what we have seen by this government, be it the creation of the support to new oligarchs with clearly shady business dealings, their interventions in justice, their attempt to control the media landscape, the way they go after their political opponents. This is standard playbook for all populist governments, be it from the right or from the left. So the next election in Greece is not just going to be about the economy, it's also going to be about democracy. And I gave a speech yesterday at Boston College, and I mentioned a book that was written recently, actually received a lot of coverage by two Harvard scholars called How Democracies Die. And the argument is very straightforward. There's no longer, the threat of a coup, but they get eroded. Their core gets eroded. And one recipe for a weak democracy is how toxic the political debate is becoming. And I can tell you that it's becoming very toxic in Greece today. We're not the ones advocating such a political discourse. If anything, we want to talk about the future. We want to unite the country. I don't want to divide Greece. But it looks like we will be entering a prolonged campaign phase where these issues are going to be quite relevant. So, all in all, yes, we are concerned about any influence in Greece. We want to leave people, the decision as to who will be, the next prime minister is a decision only the Greek people can make, and I'm pretty confident that they will make the right decision.
So if we think about Russian influence, perhaps focused on the Thessaloniki port and the real estate holdings, we're also looking at a new trend of China's influence in the south, in the port of Pyrrhos, a major holding now, I believe 51% of the port, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Some have suggested that a decision that was taken last year about whether Greece would support a European Union human rights statement against China, which Greece did not support, is there starting to become, because Greece looks increasingly important as a port for China's Belt and Road Initiative, and of course the rail and the opening to the Western Balkans, where we also see China increasing their infrastructure footprint. Help us understand what China's influence in Greece means.
Look, I'm talking about Greece leveraging its geopolitical position to the maximum. This means that Greece, by nature, is an entry point for trade from the east and potentially from the south. East Africa, India, China. Piraeus, Greece, is a natural entry point with these goods. And I must say that when Chinese interests expressed an interest in purchasing the port of Piraeus, there was nobody else interested. And I also have to acknowledge that this investment has been a successful investment. It has created jobs. It has improved the efficiency of the port, and it has the potential of revitalizing, an entire city. So, with this investment, personally, I want to be very clear. I'm happy with this investment, but I would like to see foreign investment in Greece to be as diversified as possible. I don't see any reason to worry that China is buying, a disproportionate share of Greek strategic assets. Again, the port of Thessaloniki, obviously Mr. Savvidis is a shareholder,
right,
but
it's
also
basically
China. But it's basically French and German interests. The French are the majority owners, and we are currently at a state where we need to encourage foreign direct investment, and provided everybody plays by the rules, we are to a certain extent agnostic as to the provenance of this, of the foreign capital that we need. Greece needs anywhere between 80 and 100 billion euros in investment, not necessarily foreign, domestic and foreign investment over the next 7 to 8 years, in order to make up for the investment gap that was created as a result of the crisis. So we need to mobilize foreign capital. We'd love to see more U.S. interest, real money, not just hedge funds. Nothing against hedge funds necessarily, but sometimes they sell at very sort of very unfortunate. The timing can be unfortunate, but I want to see more real investment in Greece. It's important that the U.S. Is the honored country in the annual Thessaloniki trade fair. I think it will be an opportunity for Greece as a whole to make a case as an attractive investment destination. I always, support foreign investment in Greece, unlike what Mr. Tsipras did when he was in the opposition. I will make the case for why Greece is an investment, an attractive investment destination. And I will make the case because I also believe that the next government is going to do a lot to facilitate foreign investment in Greece. So I encourage people to look at Greece now, because at some point I think there will be a political change. But coming back to your question about China, I'm not too concerned about an increased or a disproportionately sort of important presence of Chinese capital in Greece.
It's a perfect segue into the United States because certainly U.S. Economic trade policy has come into focus with President Trump's announcement that he will be seeking tariffs on steel and aluminum. The EU has said it's ready for countermeasures should that be in place. That does not help a good transatlantic trade and investment climate. Help us understand from your perspective, and I'm sure in some of your discussions with U.S. officials here, you're trying to strengthen Greek opportunities economically. A trade war is not going to help that, right?
No, it's not. And I'm a believer in free trade. I think there should be rules, but I think the World Trade Organization is the body that should set those rules. And I think that trade wars are, at the end of the day, eventually they're lose-lose propositions. And of course, there's concern that this could lead to an escalation. And it's only to be expected that the European Union is going to sort of retaliate in one way or another. And I just hope that this is not going to spiral out of control, and it's not going to affect the state of play vis-a-vis the economic relations of the U.S. versus Europe. I mean, in general, this should come to no surprise to you. There's concern in Europe, and as someone who considers myself a true friend of the United States, the fact that the U.S. seems to be removing itself from the leading role it played in the international sort of political defense, security, and economic post-World War II arrangement is something that is being obviously discussed in Europe, and it forces Europe to look at its own sort of integration process with a greater sense of urgency. We are looking at European defense, and it's only natural that we do so. And Greece should be at the forefront of this discussion because we are one of the few countries that actually spends more than 2% of our GDP on defense. So we have value to add to this discussion. But the concern is obviously there, and I hope we'll stop here, and there's going to be a cool down period for reflection. Reflection is always good.
I think we all share your view of just slow down, make sure we know the consequences. You know, if someone would have told me several years ago that the U.S.-Greek relationship would be this strong today, knowing the views of Syriza and the left in Greece, I would have said that's not possible. So bilateral relations are strong. Our relationship, particularly our security and defense relationship, Suda Bay issues, that's strong. But give me your prognosis on the U.S.-Greek bilateral relationship today, and what should you win, the party win the election, where would you take it from there?
You're right. It's a surprise. It's a welcome surprise.
Indeed.
I think that as far as the Greek-U.S. relationship is concerned, the sort of U-turn that Syriza made was a U-turn in the right direction. The same holds true for the relationship between Greece and Israel, the relationship between Greece and Egypt. All these were policies that were forged by the previous governments, by the center-right governments, and they seem to become mainstream policies in Greece. And I think this is good because it adds continuity and predictability to our foreign policy. But I think we can do more. Again, given the nature of the relationship, I would focus more on economic ties, on business ties. I would really go out of my way to make the case for why U.S. companies should invest in Greece, and not just the traditional companies, but also the new tech giants. There's an interesting piece of news for those of you who follow Greece closely that Tesla decided to set up a research center in Greece. Small, but it's a good start because we've been making the case that we have excellent human capital in Greece, excellent engineers, and we should have more sort of research and development centers in Greece for technology companies. We could see Greece as a regional hub for headquarters for U.S. companies, shared services out of Greece. And of course, I would do much more to also foster the ties between Greek and US educational institutions. I passionately care about education. I think it's a true anomaly that we still have a constitutional ban that does not allow us to set up private universities in Greece. It's my commitment to actually change that. But until we do it, we need more ties between Greek public universities and Greek American institutions. We need more programs in English. Greek public universities should be at the forefront of offering programs in classics, in philosophy, in archaeology. I mean, if we don't do it, who's going to do it? So there are lots of also soft areas. Greece as a base for for filmmaking, where we could really go beyond what we traditionally consider the core of our relationship, which is defense and security. And of course, with defense and security, we could do more. I think I would personally be open for sort of a long-term agreement on Souda Bay, which is an issue which could be, I think we can find a win-win solution, both for the US and for Greece. That may be asking too much for Syriza to talk about this, given that they're sort of the party that always fantasized about kicking out US bases from Greece, but that was again the old Andreas Papandreou rhetoric. This is nothing new. And then he came into power and did a deal with the US. So the left is accustomed to these types of U-turns. But I think we can do much more, and certainly from the U.S. perspective, when you look at Greece in a turbulent region, Greece is a predictable partner, because the consensus is now in Greece that this relationship is particularly important, and regardless of our core sort of European identity, this is a bilateral relationship that is cherished and can only go in one direction, and that is towards better.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to have one last question, then we're going to bring this wonderful audience in that I'm sure are going to have a lot of questions for you as well. But let me end on a domestic note. So elections, timing. Lots of questions about the timing of those elections. The polls that I'm looking at suggest that New Democracy is well ahead right now. But there's a question mark both of when Greece exits the memorandum and when the implementation of really, I think, extremely painful pension cuts may happen. Help us understand how that all plays out and the timing of when the Greek people can go to the polls and express their will.
Back in 2014, Greece was on the path towards a sustainable recovery. The third program was completely unnecessary. It was a price we paid for the first 6 months of tragic negotiations by Cyprus and Varoufakis that almost pushed us to the brink of a Grexit. And unfortunately, the consequences of this period are still with us, because the third program may be coming to an end, but essentially, Cyprus has already signed up to a fourth program. What do I mean by that? That there is a conditionality regarding our fiscal policy that goes beyond the third program. So we have agreed to fiscal measures which exceed 5 billion euros for 2019-2020, including, as you said, painful pension cuts and lowering the tax threshold. So for the first time, poor Greeks are actually going to pay income tax. And this is the legacy of Mr. Tsipras. That's what he's going to, unfortunately, that's what he's going to leave behind. So I think we can credibly talk about almost a fourth program, but that doesn't have any funding. So we have the conditionality without the funding. So we still need to raise money from the international capital markets. And we can only do that at a reasonable interest rate if we have a credible plan for the future. And I think the only party that currently has a credible plan for the future is New Democracy. So we would be much more likely to achieve reasonable, good funding with reasonable interest rate than the current government. Now, elections could take place anytime between now and, in my mind, May 2019. Again, I'm not going to risk predicting when the elections are going to take place. In Greece, we have a parliamentary system. The government can call an early election whenever they think it's convenient for them to do so. I don't think it will be convenient for them to do so because I don't see why the big lead in the polls is going to shrink. I think people understand that Greeks are not going to give Cyprus a third chance. I think they will give us, they'll give me personally, my first chance to put this country in order. I think Cyprus was elected in sort of extraordinary circumstances. He has failed to deliver. He's not the leader to take Greece forward into the future. So, in my mind, the timing obviously is important, and I don't put all my faith in polls, but I put a lot of faith in my door-to-door campaigning. So that's what I look at. I do a lot of, I'm in a constant campaigning mode. I talk to lots of Greeks, I'm outside Athens, and there's an urge for change. So that I care more about these sorts of interactions than the actual polls. So I'm reasonably optimistic that we will win and that we can, put together a program that will make the life of the average Greek better. Because at the end of the day, this is all about trust. You've seen what happened in Italy. Yes. There's still a strong anti-establishment trend out there. It hasn't disappeared. It won't disappear quickly. And frankly, I'm satisfied by the fact that as a leader of a traditional party, and everywhere traditional parties come under a lot of pressure, we've been able to significantly change our perception, change the party, bring in new talent, new ideas, and we seem to be doing much better than many people expected. So the hard work is still ahead of us, but I'm sort of pretty happy with what we have achieved so far.
Excellent. Well, I know we started a few minutes late. With your permission, perhaps we can a little later because I know we have lots of questions. So let's bring our audience into the conversation. If you could please raise your hand and identify yourself. We don't have that much time, so please be very crisp with your questions. What we'll do is we will bundle a few of them together, so we'll just try to get as many as possible. So I'm going to sort of go from my right to left. So Matt, if we can start here and speak very clearly into that microphone because sometimes it's hard to hear. Thank you.
Professor Theodore Kyriakos, are you planning to declare an exclusive economic zone for Greece after you become Prime Minister of the country?
Thank you. And I think there was another question right there. Yes, thank you.
My name is Mario Rizos. The recent years we have a huge brain drain leaving Greece. How do you think we can reverse that?
Thank you. Is there any more questions in this section? Great. Okay, Donna will come right up here. Ma'am, microphone's coming your way.
Hello, Athena Balto, attorney based in DC and New York. Could you please elaborate a little bit more as to why Greece is an attractive investment destination for Americans and in which sectors in particular?
Okay, why don't we just stop at the first three?
I'll take them in reverse. Yeah.
You're going to reverse order, and you got them. Brain drain, you got them all. I don't have to remind you.
I'll take them in reverse order. Greece has lots of natural competitive advantages that stem out of the beauty of the country, its geographic locations, but also the talent of its people. It's cheap. We've become much more competitive as a result of the crisis, and it currently offers lots of opportunities in sectors such as tourism and real estate, energy, traditional or renewable, agri-business, logistics, healthcare, even financial services such as insurance. I'm saying this because there was interest by American investors to purchase a leading Greek insurer. So the opportunities are clearly there. If you just look at tourism, we probably need around 20 billion euros in order to upgrade our tourism infrastructure. And by infrastructure, I don't just mean the hotels, but also the basic infrastructure supporting tourism, such as ports, marinas, a lot of scope for bringing in the private sector, and still a lot of scope for privatizations. So this is a case that can be made not just in terms of the overall appeal of Greece, but also it needs to be made on a sector by sector. We need a sector by sector approach. What do foreign investors look? A reliable government, stable tax regime, greatly simplified licensing process, rule of law. We sort these things out, and we have very specific plans on all these topics. And I think we can make a very convincing case about why people, why international investors should look at Greece. And I'm confident that this is a case that can be made. Brain drain, a major concern. We talk a lot about the diaspora, and I've been very close to the Greek homogenia, Greeks living in America, first, second, third generation Greeks, but we have a new diaspora, people who left the country in times of crisis. The true risk takers left because it's not easy to leave. But we need their talent back, but they're only going to return if we offer them employment opportunities. They left because they were no good, because the jobs were not there. So it's all about jobs at the end of the day. If we create enough good jobs, I'm sure we will convince a fraction, I hope a significant fraction of those people who left to come back. But they also need long-term predictability. Once you've taken a decision to leave, you're not going to come back easily unless you're sure, you're certain about your decision, because you're not going to leave again. So presenting a long-term vision for the country is for me extremely important. And then of course you have to look at where exactly did we lose the talent. And we may also need to realize that sometimes our Greek educational system is actually exacerbating a mismatch between the skills that the labor market requires and those that actually our universities are producing. The truth is, we, quote unquote, produce more doctors than we need. We produce more lawyers than we need. So what are doctors going to do? I mean, there's only that many jobs in Greece. Should we be spending, I don't know, 200,000 euros in total to train doctors only to see them leave and go to Germany and Sweden? It's debatable whether we should do that. So looking forward, we need to do as much as we can to align the requirements of the job market with an educational system, a university system that is currently not in touch with the real job market. And this, of course, also means looking at technical and vocational education, where we have a big hole, but where a lot of the jobs are going to be created. We don't have a high-end sort of tourism business school in Greece. Yet we are a tourist country. We should be at the forefront of tourism education. And if the state can't do it, let's find a way to do it privately, even if that means that there are going to be issues regarding the sort of the professional sort of recognition of the diplomas. We don't have a top shipping school in Greece yet. We're the largest shipping power in the world. We can't convince our kids to become captains. Yet you can be a 30-year-old, captain of a VLCC making 10,000 euros a month and working, 7-8 months a year in a ship that has no comparison in terms of the amenities to what, ships were like 20, 30 years ago. So I'm talking about these issues because they are important, not just about the diaspora, but also about the new graduates and how we think about the jobs of the future. Economic zone, exclusive economic zone, there is no obvious and simple answer to this question. It cannot be answered with a yes or a no. Of course, it is Greece's right to declare an exclusive economic zone, but we need to be aware of the ramifications of such an act. I would first of all start by solving the problem with Albania, which was actually solved by the government in 2009. The Albanians went back on the agreement that was signed. The government is sort of renegotiating. Hopefully, it's going to be an agreement that is going to be acceptable. So let's start to our west first.
Perfect. I think we can take a few more with your
Sure,
patience.
yeah.
So I see one hand there, and that may be going, gone. That may be, oh, I have a second one there. Perfect. So, yes, sir, thank you.
Hi, I'm Nick Klesis. My father was one of the people that left Greece in search of better opportunities many years ago. You spoke of the need for structural reform, but of course you're talking about an economic sphere. There are some that would say that the political system itself is fundamentally unsound. What kind of changes would you consider? And let me give you an example. Members of parliament frequently head ministries, and they get to do this, and they get to exploit their positions by hiring their relatives, their friends, their patronage networks, and also it's a great source of corruption if you can figure out how to get the money. Would you consider hiring technocratic experts, not politicians, to run ministries under a new democracy government? Thank you.
Fantastic. We have the colleague, I think, right behind. Yes, thank you, sir.
Hi, Peter Milios, American Hellenic Institute. My question is, what officials, if any, have you met with here in Washington, D.C. from the U.S. government, and what message are they departing to you?
Excellent way, and a great question to sum up.
Maybe we'll take one last.
One more. Sorry, I didn't go to my. Okay, one more. We'll squeeze one more in.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Joanna Owen. I would like to ask you, I know you have been quoting the platform of giving the vote to the Greek homogeneia around the world. How realistic do you think that will be if you are in government? Thank you.
That's a good question to wrap up. First of all, it's an excellent question. I am concerned with corruption and also with low level corruption, high level, middle level, low level. I was heading the Minister for Administrative Reform, and I think I focused a lot on issues of transparency and good governance. And these are really important reforms. But we need to lead by example. So the straightforward answer is yes, I do intend to hire technocrats to run some of the ministries. In a parliamentary system, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to impose a complete ban between the legislative and the executive. We're not in a presidential system, so there is no direct separation of powers between parliament and the executive. But yes, I do intend to hire technocrats to lead ministers, but I also am looking for the best possible talent for the entire operations of the government. And it's going to be fully meritocratic to the extent that I can guarantee that. We cannot afford to return to the old habits of patronage and clientelistic politics. Unfortunately, Syriza is doing exactly that as we speak. So I'm going to significantly reduce the number of secretary generals, advisors, the fat that surrounds, the patronage fat that surrounds every administration. It's a commitment I've made, and sometimes you do have to lead by example. You have to take occasionally painful decisions. I've publicly said that no members of my family are going to be in my cabinet. Not always easy to make those calls, but sometimes it's necessary to symbolically indicate that you want a clean break with the past. Having said that, I do want to point out that Syriza has taken patronage politics to a new level in terms of literally hiring, friends and family right, left, and center. What is happening today is completely unacceptable, and it's costing us a lot of money because the state is increasing again in size. You have lots of people hired through temporary contracts with a promise that they will become permanent civil servants at some point. So they're basically being held hostage by the government. The government is telling them, look, vote for me because I'm the only one who's going to convert your contract into a permanent contract, in spite of the fact that they can't do it because it's unconstitutional. I'm telling them that it can't happen. So, but it's always nice to hear a convenient lie, and that's what Syriza is basically doing. In terms of meetings, had a broad range of meetings with the executive, with leadership of the of the Congress, State Department, essentially making the case that I tried to make today. Greece as a stable and credible partner in a turbulent region, but also as a country worth considering as it sort of hopefully breaks out of the crisis. I think it's a message that is well received with a lot of interest in Washington these days. Last but not least, because it's a question very close to my heart, I will get this done for the diaspora. It's a commitment. It is perfectly doable. We have actually presented a piece of legislation to Parliament on how it can be done, but Syriza refuses to bring it to the floor for discussion because it's very uncomfortable for them to discuss about the right to vote for the Greek diaspora. How would you do it? It's not that complicated. Other countries do it. You would vote, you would need to pre-register and vote at the embassy or at the Greek consulates or at other pre-assigned spaces. You would only vote for what we call το ψηφοδέλτιο επικρατείας, the national ballot, because it greatly simplifies the process because you don't need ballots from all the electoral districts. But it's something which we thought hard about it as far as the operations are concerned. We can do it. We need 6 to 12 months to prepare it. It will be done. We need 200 votes in the next parliament to pass it. But I want to see, once we present it, who's going to say no. It will be very difficult to say no to such a proposal. So it will be done. I'll get the votes. And I tell, the Omogenia, the Greeks, the diaspora living abroad, come to vote. Preferably vote for me, but come to vote because hopefully it's going to be the last time you will have to come to Greece to vote because next time you can actually vote here. So I hope this is a convincing pitch for the Greek diaspora.
Well, you've made a convincing pitch that Greece is really an anchor of stability in a very important geostrategic region for the United States, that we have a strong and enduring bilateral relationship that we only hope to grow in the future. And thank you so much for walking us through. I sort of put you through your paces. We really walked through a lot of very fraught, complex international issues, domestic issues, and I feel like I'm better informed of how this is going to work. We will watch very closely.
I can tell from your questions that you are very well informed about what's happening in Greece.
I will pass that along to my boss. Thank you very much. No, it's been a fantastic conversation. We look forward to watching developments both through the election process, but please know that you have a lot of support, not only in this room, but Greece has support from the United States to get through these very difficult last 8 years, and we're glad it's a brighter today and a more hopeful tomorrow. With your applause, please thank Mr. Mitsotakis.
Thank you. Thank you very much.